Welcome, everyone. My name is Emily Bernstein, and I'm the Education Outreach Associate at the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh. The Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh is focused mainly on teaching the Holocaust and also connecting it with the injustices of today. Through education, the Holocaust Center seeks to address these injustices and empower individuals to build a more civil and humane society. And more often than not, we are empowering teachers and students. And today we'd like to have a conversation with some of you educators who might be new to an opportunity we host every year called the Waldman International Arts and Writing Competition. We've been doing the Waldman Competition for just over 35 years. This year will be the 36th year. And it was generously created by a family, Hal and Diane Waldman. And it has seen so much growth in the number of years that it's been around. And at some point, we were able to connect our competition to other areas around the world. So it became an international competition by including students from Pittsburgh's sister city or region in Israel, Carmel Misgav, through the Partnership Together program. And interestingly enough, this year we have a new sister city, Warsaw, Poland. So students from Israel, Poland, and Pittsburgh will be competing in this year's competition, which will focus on learning about the Holocaust through artistic expression, whether that be visual arts or creative writing. And our visual arts categories are separated into two different categories this year. We have two-dimensional and three-dimensional art, which is different from years past where we've had film. We've since retired that category for now. I'm going to share the information about the Waldman competition in another link below this film, and you'll see our website, which is hcofpgh.org, and there'll be a / and Waldman. So I'll send that to everybody along with this film who's on our educator listserv. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce some really important people who are going to talk to us today about how they use Waldman in the classroom to generate enthusiasm and help teach about the Holocaust and enrich their classroom. So first, I want to introduce Nick Haberman, who was one of our educators of the year, our Holocaust Educator of the Year. He teaches at Shaler High School. He teaches an elective on Holocaust, human rights, and genocide. And he is also the founder of the Light Education Initiative. And I will also include the link to his website below so that you can learn more about Light and what it is to be a Light Center in your school. Nick, I'll hand it over to you. Please tell us a little bit about how Waldman has played a role in your classroom and what it enriches for your students.
I've been doing the Waldman competition in my classroom for a number of years. And I think just as importantly, I've been trying to connect other educators in my school district to the Waldman competition. And every year since I can remember now, I've had students submit entries to the Waldman competition, and they, I can't tell you how excited they get about the opportunity to do something that they feel is larger than just their district. They get to participate in something where they're connecting with students from other districts, where they're potentially meeting students even from other countries, and where they get to show off their skills and their abilities that they have in painting and drawing and sculpting and woodwork and metalwork and photography and writing through poetry and journal entries. The sky's the limit with Waldman. And the theme every year is different. This year, the theme of resilience, my students are extremely excited about, because we all know that everyone's going through a tough time in school right now. So carving out a moment in your school day to talk with the students about how Holocaust survivors were resilient before, during, and after the Holocaust, and how they can learn from those lessons of resilience to apply to their own lives. I don't think there's anything more relevant that we can talk about right now. This project is also, for me, cross-curricular. I've always worked with the art teachers, with the ELA teachers, with the social studies teachers, with the librarians. It connects the high school where I teach to our middle school, because it's a middle school and it's a high school project. So it gives me an excuse and an opportunity to connect with teachers that I don't normally work with. I can't say enough about how it provides opportunities for our students that they don't necessarily otherwise have. Additionally, I'm always looking for ways to put my students into leadership roles. That's what LIGHT is. It's an acronym for Leadership Through Innovation in Genocide and Human Rights Teaching. And I'm always looking for ways to get them thinking about life outside of the classroom and provide them opportunities to show what they've learned to their parents, their peers, and their community members. And through Waldman, students are, in a sense, creating their own art show. And in the spring, after they have turned in all their Waldman projects and completed everything in December and January, the students get to plan an event where they get to show off what they've done. So not only are we doing an art competition, not only are we doing a writing competition, not only are we connecting with people from all across the district, but we're also creating an opportunity to connect with local libraries, community members, and people who wouldn't otherwise study the Holocaust. So it's really transforming, I'm going to take the term from Together We Remember, transforming remembrance into action. And I love the project. I'm going to continue doing the project indefinitely in my Holocaust class. I can't say enough about it. I'm looking forward to talking about some best practices today with everybody and some mistakes that I've made with the contest, and also some tips and some tricks in not only getting students to do the Waldman competition, but getting them to do it right and getting them to submit their entries on time.
That's always a challenge. Thank you so much, Nick. I want to briefly introduce two other members of our teacher cohort. Tiffany O'Shea is an ELA teacher at Montour High School, and Peter Meisels is a social studies teacher at PA Distance Learning Charter School. And these two teachers are so exemplary of how to incorporate Holocaust education just the way that Nick described, by really involving the students and helping them generate leadership skills and real true creative interest in the subject, and to gain meaning from it. So I just want to thank everybody for being here today. And we're going to hear more from Tiffany and Peter in a little bit after our presentation when we open up for our questions. So Nick, take it away. Let us know some of your tips and tricks.
Yeah, I think I'll start with anybody who's never done the Waldman competition before. The first year, it was difficult because you're thinking about always not only how to get the students to turn in a project, for you, but also how to get them to be champions of their own work. Because at the end of the day, the Waldman competition is something that the students have to submit their own artwork. I, as their teacher, don't submit the projects for them. They have to do it. And it puts a sense of responsibility on the students that we know they all need to practice. And also the Waldman competition requires them to apply what they've been doing in their ELA classes forever, in their social studies classes, when it comes to citing their sources, making sure they're using appropriate sources, historically accurate sources. They're going back as much as they can to primary sources. So just big picture approach to Waldman competition is, before I even tell the students that they're doing the competition and that I'm connecting them with the competition, we talk about the theme. And this year, what I did is I had the students study resilience in the Holocaust through another Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh resource called CHUTZ-POW, the comic book that the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh has produced 4 volumes of. But the students also can draw on Anne Frank, Number the Stars. They can draw on Night and the countless other resources that I'm sure Tiffany and Peter can talk about a little bit more. But before, again, I introduce them to the contest, we talk about individuals who really embody the theme. So this year, since it was resilience, I asked the students several days in a row, how do these certain individuals capture the spirit of resilience before, during, and or after the Holocaust? So I'll just give you some examples. Sophie Scholl and her brother. Sophie Scholl was in part one of the founders of the White Rose movement in Berlin She had been raised up in Nazi Germany, and she was a student. She was a teenager, and she decided to take a stand with her brother and their friends against the Nazis. So obviously that's a resilient move right there. And Sophie Scholl did not survive World War II. She didn't make it, honestly, very long into the Nazi regime. She was executed for standing up against the Nazis. Now, my students then look at her story, study her story, and they think about how her story inspires them to take a stand whenever they're faced with difficult choices. Sophie didn't make the easy choice. She took the difficult choice. It cost her her life, but she and her brother inspired countless people, even in 2020. We look at individuals like Judah Samet and like Jack Sitzalmer and Herman Snyder and Shulamit, who are Pittsburgh-based survivors. And I could go on with a laundry list of Pittsburgh-based survivors. And I asked the students how those individuals were resilient in the Holocaust. And after a while, I asked the students, which individual would you like to focus on? Would you like, which individual do you feel best captures the spirit of resilience? Is it somebody in Pittsburgh? Is it an international upstander? Who is it? And the students all choose different individuals. I have some students focusing on Les Banos. I have some students focusing on Anne Frank. I have some students focusing on Elie Wiesel. So the stories are just all across the board. And then I tell them about the Waldman competition. Then I talk to them about how they can tell the story of their individuals through art or writing through this 36-year-old competition, and they could potentially win scholarship money by participating in this competition. They can win recognition that they can put on their resume and their college applications. And then we go through, what it is you can do in the competition. I ask them, if you're going to tell the story of Shulamit or Les Banos or Elie Wiesel or Anne Frank, do you want to do so through writing or art? And then the students, they choose a road. And then once they choose the road, if they choose writing, I ask them, would you like to write a poem? Would you like to write a journal entry? Would you like to write a short story? And they keep splitting off, and the students go in these different directions. I ask the students if they want to do art, and those that pick art choose, I say, do you want to do 3D art or 2D art? They split again. Do you want to paint? Do you want to draw? Do you want to sculpt? Do you want to write a comic book? Do you want to do a photo essay? Do you want to sew something, weld something, make something out of wood, make something out of resin? And they just keep branching off. And at the end of the day, they know before they've begun their project who they want to focus on, what they think they might want to do, and then we go over the rules and requirements. And that way they don't get tripped up, because the first time I did this competition, I started with the rules and requirements, their eyes glazed over, they had no clue what they wanted to do, and a lot of students just fell apart from the beginning. So now my approach, my best practice that I wanted to share with everybody today is going over the theme of resilience and what resilience means, narrowing down who it is that you feel was resilient during, before, or after the Holocaust, narrowing down how you would like to tell the story of resilience, and lastly, going over what it is required in this competition. And I'm curious how Tiffany's presented this to her students in the past, in previous themes for women in the Holocaust or children in the Holocaust or local survivors, and then how Peter intends on doing this in his, if I'm not mistaken, Peter, first year of doing this competition, correct? So Tiffany, what are some of your best practices in presenting this?
Interestingly, you pretty much summed up my two key points. I found through failure that introducing the requirements led to absolute disaster in terms of the quality of the submissions that I received. So I personally have I've decided that, very similar to what Nick was saying, making sure that there's a reason and a why and a person, especially this year, a person behind the research in the project before actually getting into the requirements. And depending on the year, I have done this as an intro into our night unit or mouse unit. I've done it as a summative assessment. It's become like a final for them at the end in some years. So I really place this in my curriculum just wherever I am that year. I don't think I have done the same thing twice because my kids don't progress at the same pace every year. So this year, for instance, my group is just finishing night. And before we started talking about Waldman, we actually were talking about genocide, and we were looking at different websites. What is genocide? Where are they occurring? And we had a broader knowledge of that term before connecting it to this idea of resilience. And so we transitioned from our reading to informal genocide research and connections. And then down the line, we came to Waldman. And now they are at the point where they have selected their person, their why, and how it connects to resilience in the end.
That sounds wonderful. Actually, I was thinking this idea of resilience is really going to be a powerful theme this year. And I'm looking forward to seeing what your students bring up with this theme, because their submissions last year were so creative. And we always see different types of art every year. So I'm looking forward to seeing Montour's art.
Tiffany, if I could jump in, a couple of things you made me think about. Number one, if you've done this project in the past, obviously, like any good project, the best way to present it is to show examples from previous years, and then the students want to outdo each other. They look at a painting and they say, that's good, but I think I can do better. And the quality of the projects year after year just improves. Number two, you hit on something that I often do, which is I make this a required project for me. They have to turn in a project on resilience to me. It's optional for them in my class to submit it to the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh as the competition. But I, of course, tell them, since you're doing all the work for me anyway, why not fill out the Google document, and why not take a couple pictures of what you've done and submit it to the Holocaust Center anyway? If you're going through all the steps, you're going through all the motions, take that last step and submit it to the competition. And the last thing that I wanted to mention, you made me think about, is this: just because I have a Holocaust elective, and just because some of the teachers who do this have standalone Holocaust classes, you can very easily do this in a 9th grade class instead of reading section 4 in the World War II unit that's called World War II and the Holocaust. You can teach the entire Holocaust through the theme of resilience and unpack it through the Waldman competition instead of doing, the reading, the worksheet, the whatever. This is a lot more engaging. And I stumbled on this project because I felt that some of my Holocaust teaching was dry and ineffective. And in doing the projects, the art, the writing, it made it so much more engaging. And 9th grade teachers and 10th grade teachers jumped on board as well, because it is, of course, it's more engaging than your stock standard textbook approach. Peter, you're doing this for the first time this year. What are some of the things you're thinking about, and what are some of the challenges that you've already sort of seen and how you've overcome them?
Sure. So yeah, like Nick said, this is my first time ever introducing the Waldman Project to my students. I've been teaching Holocaust education for 5 years now, and I'm looking to branch off and offer more opportunities to my students, specifically because I'm in a cyber school setting, not just this year, but all the time. So the more opportunities I can provide to my students to connect with their community and a greater purpose of education, bring their learning to life, is something that I think is difficult to achieve in the cyber setting, and oftentimes not tried because it's more difficult. And it's my hope that with the Waldman Project, I can expand my potential as a teacher and their potential as students to try these things in this type of setting. So whenever I first learned about Waldman, I thought it would be a fantastic opportunity for students to learn the beauty of mentorship. So one thing that I've benefited from immensely as a teacher is having teachers better than me guide me along the way, learning things from them, taking bits and pieces here and there to help me be the best teacher that I can possibly be. I want to provide that to my kids this year. And I think it's very important for all the teachers listening that you don't have to go head on into the Waldman Project immediately. For instance, myself, I'm taking baby steps. Throughout this semester, History of the Holocaust is a semester course. I have, taken informal and formal data on the students that I think would really enjoy this type of a project based on their creativity, their interest in the work that they've put forth. These are a certain amount of students that I think would love to be a part of this, because I'm not creating it as a specific part of my curriculum this semester. I'm making it as an extracurricular project, something that students can do on their own time with me, with another teacher, to create this awesome project. So that's my plan this year. I have a few students that have really set the standard strong with this mentor-mentee style of things. So I work with my students. They arrange the meetings with me. They send me topics that they want to go through. They say, hey, Mr. Meiseles, do you have time to meet during this time, this day, for us to meet in a Zoom chat to discuss all the ideas and the sketches that I've done for the Waldman project? And they run the show, which I think has grown really well for them. And from that, I have, just like Nick was saying, cross-curricular opportunities. We have the art teachers involved and the English teachers involved that we're all collaborating to create these really awesome projects. So that's fine and dandy in the cyber setting, because we may have a little more time built in for students to be able to arrange those meetings. So throughout history of the Holocaust, my students learn a ton about the topic of this year, hope and resilience during the Holocaust. We learn about Adolfo Kaminsky, the forger, who created forged baptismal certificates and identification cards and saved the lives of hundreds and hundreds of Jewish children and men and women as well throughout the Holocaust by allowing them to escape Germany. Someone who was a teenager like them that stood up to the Nazis and knew what they were doing was wrong and didn't care about the ramifications and wanted to make change. We're also learning about Simon Wiesenthal and his book, The Sunflower. And his version of hope and resilience is a little bit different. He's not trying to enact revenge. He's trying to learn about why forgiveness is such an important part of us remembering about the Holocaust. Do you choose to forgive and forget what the Nazis did or not? And it really opens our minds to all that. So that was the first place where my students really built their projects from. And I think the Waldman is fantastic because it doesn't just make the kids do an essay. It's humongously important. My kids, when they hear that we're doing an essay, they're like, all right, Mr. Meiseles, I'll see you in a week. I'm not doing this. And I think that's the case for a lot of students. It's just not the most exciting initially thing when students hear the word essay. So the fact that Waldman provides so many different mediums in which the kids can do the project, poetry, creative writing, graphic design, 2D animation, 3D animation, it's endless. And the kids can really use their style of creativity and learning to pole vault from that. So this is my plan. As a first-year teacher doing the Waldman project, my first year, I'm choosing a certain amount of students that have shown significant interest in Holocaust education. We're creating a mentor-mentee relationship for them to build their projects, and I'll see how that goes. If I see that these kids completely crushed it, and I could see other students doing it, next year I'm going to take Nick's approach. I'm going to make it a part of my curriculum. I'll make it a project. I'll make it a part of a unit, probably right after I introduce the sunflower. The kids will do their project and they can choose whether or not to submit it to the Waldman. And then the next year after that, I would like to not just make it cross-curricular working with teachers, but cross-curricular working with other classes. So having classes, English and art and social studies and social changes and all of the different courses we offer at PA Distance to work together, to brainstorm, to peer review, to compare their projects, to create this like a school-wide initiative. Now, like I said, I'm starting with baby steps. I'm not just saying, hey, all school, do this, right? So any baby steps that you all can make to initiate this into your school, the better, because you're going to learn what works, you're going to learn what doesn't, and you're going to be able to take that data and move forward with it and find out what you could do better for the next time around. For those of you who just teach, for those of you who teach English or teach Holocaust education for just a small amount of time, it's important to understand that, for instance, we all dominantly teach Holocaust for an entire course or for a whole unit or for a few units. You can do the Waldman project without having to have all of that as a part of your curriculum. even teaching 2 weeks of classes based on the Holocaust, or specifically using the Waldman to teach a new skill, such as creative writing, such as poetry, such as sculpture, woodworking, painting, include that in your curriculum, and you are then teaching social studies in that environment. So the Waldman opportunity is something that I'm really looking forward to. My kids are already loving it, and it's creating a really good relationship between them and their teachers, self-advocating and making things happen for themselves. So I'm sure I'll be getting back to Emily and Nick and Tiffany about how things go this year, and we'll see how things go. But I encourage you guys to, tread into that deep water, see how things go, and you can always back up a little bit, but it's a really worthwhile opportunity. I'm already seeing that.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to seeing your entries as well. I'm sort of the back end person where I get to see all of these entries. And I would just like to say that what I love about all three of your approaches is that it hones in on a personal experience of a one person or a group of people who experienced the Holocaust in some way. You also turn it around to make it a very personal experience in the sense of, reflection, that the students have to reflect on their own lives and then use that to be a leader, to do something innovative and create something that's their own. So I just want to say that, I'm very impressed by all three of you, and we're so excited to have more people join, whether you are a novice teacher or you are more experienced. It's just such a wonderful opportunity. And just a little bit more about that opportunity, I wanted to say that we do have some opportunities for scholarship. There are first, second, and third place scholarships in each category. And this is going to be only the third year running that we do have an essay competition. For your students that aren't necessarily so artsy-fartsy, for the lack of a better word, there is an avenue for them to express themselves in a creative nonfiction way. So I will also link our essay competition prompt at the bottom of this film in the links, so that you can also use that as an opportunity. I use the word opportunity so much in this film, but it's true. And not only that, the students who win have an opportunity to meet with students from all over the world. They get to talk with students in Israel who have won. They get to talk with students in Poland now who have won. And that cross-cultural connection is going to be invaluable, not only to the students, but to the teachers. Teachers get to meet other teachers during this experience. And when COVID passes, thankfully, hopefully, you'll be able to meet those students in person. And that's really going to enrich your classroom and help your school. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for participating again. Is there anyone else anyone want to add anything before we go?
I want to jump back in because you did say the word opportunity. Peter said the word opportunity. I know I said the word opportunity. Tiffany, you were probably thinking it if you didn't say it. It's during COVID, we need as teachers to be connecting each other to turnkey programs, to opportunities for the students, because a lot of us are really struggling with how to translate overnight things that we've done in person for 15 years into something that needs to be done virtually. Peter has an advantage because he's always thinking in the virtual world, but that doesn't mean that you should think, oh, well, Peter's, he's going to be better off at this. What you need to do then is connect with Peter. And if you've always done this in person and you're trying to translate it digitally overnight, well, then talk with some of us who are doing the same thing. What we're trying to do through the Holocaust Center, all of this call, this work, is to connect each other so that when I need help, I can go to Peter. And when he needs help, he can go to Tiffany. When somebody gets stuck on the rules, we can connect them to Emily. We want to make this community feel like a community and feel like it's connected and like it's a network where we can lean on each other for help. Additionally, one last thing I wanted to add is that I think it's important to do what Peter said and to think about this as a long road, to think about this as a gradual introduction of this competition. You don't need to get your whole class to do this tomorrow. The advantage of working with and on programs that are through the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh is that it's been around for 40 years. It's a brick and mortar institution. It's like the Carnegie Museums and Phipps and the zoo and the Children's Museum. It's been here for a long time and it's going to be here for a long time. So what you can do is you can tell your students and your colleagues, we're going to try this out this year. Next year, we're going to make it a little bit bigger and better. And it'll be the 37th year of the competition. And the year after, it'll be the 38th year of the competition. And it'll be the 42nd year of the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh. It's going to be here for the rest of your career. So you don't need to think that this is just a one and done flash in the pan. This is something you can gradually work through and you can continue to rely on year after year because it's going to be there.
And I wanted to add that something I wish I had realized earlier on was that when you're connecting this to your curriculum, it's not simply a bonus or a creative assignment. There's so much more than that. And it really is so easy to justify a creative competition in your classroom. ELA-wise standards, I have this as a research assignment. So you have research elements, you have citations, there's the language and writing. You can talk about audience. I have my kids do gallery walks and there's a lot of peer feedback and revisions in there. I wish I had realized so many different ways that I could have connected this to curriculum. And I feel like for me personally, that would have made it so much easier to just get into it. And as Nick had said, I do the same thing where this is an assignment in my class. It's part of my curriculum. The submission is just the added bonus for that. So it is a ready-made, this is something that you can put in regardless of what you are working on in your class or which class you are working in.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Nick. This has been such a wonderful, a wonderful discussion so that new teachers can learn that this is doable. And you can always rely on the Holocaust Center and our network of teachers. If you are looking for someone to kind of help you design your lesson, we'd be happy to help you and also connect you to other experienced teachers like Tiffany and Nick and Peter. So with that, I just want to say, please enter the competition. Our deadline is January 7th at 4 p.m. Everything is virtual and everything will be linked to this film. Take care, everybody.